It all started when I accidentally saw my best friend sitting on my husband's lap. Ethan, your stupid wife didn't notice that I swapped our daughter with hers, right? Claire whispered, her voice dripping with malice. She spoils our daughter every day, but where is my daughter, hers? Why don't you bring her with you? I've been punishing her for a month, and it's getting boring. You won't feel bad, will you? My husband said coldly. Of course not, she replied. I only married Elena for her family's money. The child she had isn't worth anything. Once our daughter inherits her fortune, I'll just kick her out. I wiped away my tears and pretended not to know anything, dedicating myself to raising their daughter. It seemed they thought I was particularly easy to deceive and would never notice anything unusual. Claire was becoming increasingly bold. Before, she would secretly meet Ethan while I was at work. Now, even when I was at home, she would find all kinds of excuses to show up. Although I knew deep down that every time Claire came to my house, it was to see her daughter and Ethan, I still didn't refuse. Whenever she came over, I warmly welcomed her. Ethan was very satisfied with this arrangement. Whenever he saw Claire arriving at our house, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes he even flirted with her in front of me, sending subtle, suggestive messages. Even Avery was becoming closer to her. Moreover, he bought a pair of house slippers for Claire so she could visit anytime. This life continued until Avery took her college entrance exam. Seeing her ridiculously low test score, Ethan pretended to be angry. How did you score so low on the exam? He asked. Avery didn't care at all. Our family has money. Why should I work hard to study? Mom can just buy me a degree. Ethan gave me a discreet glance. Seeing that I didn't express an opinion, he continued, no matter how much your mommy loves you, she can't let you do this. It's not easy for her to manage the company alone. You have to make an effort. Otherwise, how can you help her in the future? Avery agreed. That's right. I'm mommy's only daughter. With so many companies under her name, how could she let me starve? Over the years, Avery had been spoiled by Claire and Ethan, becoming arrogant and domineering with no skills or knowledge. At her level, she wasn't even qualified to intern at my company. But I didn't say it directly. Instead, I said seriously, how can being a general manager be enough? She's my only daughter, and she should inherit everything from me. I've already planned everything. I'll send Avery abroad for further studies. When she returns, I'll fully entrust the company to her. Hearing this, Claire's eyes lit up instantly. Ethan and their daughter nodded joyfully, their faces full of smiles. Watching the three of them laughing proudly, I laughed as well. They laughed at me for being too foolish, while I laughed at them for being too naive. During the study abroad application process, I took Avery to the company every day. I taught her to familiarize herself with the company's operations without reservation. 3 years later, Avery returned from abroad. The moment Claire saw her daughter, she couldn't control her emotions. She rushed forward and hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. After expressing their longing for each other, Avery walked straight to me and said bluntly, "Mom, I'm back. When will you let me take over the company?" Looking at her impatient expression, I gave a faint smile. "Let's go. I've already organized a press conference right now. I'll entrust everything to you in front of everyone." The press conference venue was packed. All eyes were on me as I announced that my daughter would take over my position as president of Sterling Group. Under the supervision of lawyers and cameras, the equity transfer agreement was signed. I transferred all my assets and company shares to my daughter's name. For a moment, the applause was thunderous. Many people admired the deep bond between us, mother and daughter. However, at that moment, my best friend arrived late, holding Ethan's hand. Under the curious gaze of the crowd, she pulled out a paternity test report and loudly announced, "Elena, to tell you the truth, Ethan and I have been in love for a long time and had a daughter at the same time as you. The hospital gave us the wrong baby. Avery is actually my biological daughter with Ethan. You've raised her for so many years. Now it's time to give her back to me." Hearing this, there was an uproar. "Isn't that Claire Montgomery, Mrs. Sterling's best friend?" She actually had an affair with Mrs. Sterling's husband and even had a child with him. The issue is, Claire's daughter died when she was just a month old. If the hospital did switch the babies, doesn't that mean Elena's real daughter is Claire's biological child? That's despicable. Not only did she steal someone else's husband, but she also killed her own daughter. Isn't this the end of the world? Moreover, Mrs. Sterling just transferred all her fortune and shares to Avery's name, and now she discovers Avery isn't her daughter. Is this what a person does? Amidst the accusations, Ethan confidently spoke. In the first half of my life, I was trapped in marriage. As a man, I tried to convince myself to be responsible for it, but I'm human too. On countless difficult nights, I kept asking myself, is this the life I want? Elena comes from a good family, she treats me well, but what I truly love is Claire. I just want to follow my true love. Is that wrong? Marriages are for happiness, and divorce should be too. Marriage shouldn't be a prison that stops me from pursuing love. I hope you all bless us. Ethan's words seemed heartfelt, a man unhappy in marriage, seeking freedom and love. I didn't bother with him. I looked at Avery and asked, what do you think? Avery calmly read the equity transfer agreement and said coldly, Mom, this is the last time I'll call you that. Although you raised me for over 20 years, you're not my biological mother. Blood is thicker than water. I hope you won't stop our family from reuniting. Ethan pulled out a divorce agreement and a bank card, throwing them at me. Let's divorce now, in front of everyone. This card has $700, which is your compensation for taking care of our daughter and the divorce over the years. Hearing this, everyone at the scene was furious. As expected, people from the same family stick together, someone muttered. Amidst everyone's outrage, I couldn't help but smile. Okay, I said. I signed the divorce agreement under everyone's astonished gaze. Seeing this, Claire and Ethan were slightly stunned, as if they hadn't expected me to agree so readily. They picked up the documents, checked them carefully, and smiled with relief. As they laughed, I spoke again. Since you've given me such a big surprise, I also have a big gift for you. Ethan looked confused and asked, a gift? What kind of gift? A big gift, I replied. After signing the papers and seeing Ethan and Claire's smiles, I felt strangely calm. It was as if all the pain I had carried for years had been lifted in that instant. It wasn't resignation, but something different, a certainty that, no matter how much they laughed now, they had no idea what I had in store for them. When they left the event, still celebrating like two infatuated teenagers, I stayed behind in the hall. The people around me tried to console me, some offering help to recover the assets I had transferred to Avery. I thanked everyone but declined any intervention. I told them I needed time to process everything. They didn't know, but all I needed was silence to put the rest of my plan into action. I went home that night. The house felt bigger, emptier, as if every wall echoed with betrayal and lies. I looked around, seeing the furniture I had once chosen carefully, the family photos on the shelves. Every object seemed to mock me, reminding me of all I had endured while being deceived. I took the photos one by one and put them in a box. I wasn't going to destroy them, not yet. Those memories had their purpose. In the weeks that followed, I acted as if everything was normal. I continued going to the company, even though Avery wasn't around. She claimed she needed time to understand her new role as the owner of everything. I didn't argue. In fact, I encouraged her. The further she stayed, the better. During this period, I began making small changes to my routine. I sold a few smaller properties that were in my personal name, ones not tied to the company. I discreetly invested the money into something Ethan and Claire would never suspect. I didn't hire expensive lawyers or investigators. I knew their pride would protect them better than any legal document. Instead, I began connecting with old acquaintances, loyal employees, and even people who, like me, had been wronged by their actions. I discovered that Claire had a history of intrigues long before she entered my life. She had destroyed a marriage before mine, something that had never been publicly mentioned. Ethan, on the other hand, had hidden debts, skillfully concealed by using my name and resources. But the most interesting discovery was about Avery. During the 3 years she spent abroad, she got involved in parties, scandals, and even minor crimes that Ethan had covered up. None of this had come to my attention before because, of course, they had gone to great lengths to maintain appearances. This gave me something valuable: patience. I let weeks turn into months. During this time, Avery tried to visit the company a few times, but she quickly realized she wasn't capable of handling anything. The employees ignored her or treated her indifferently. She became frustrated, which led her to spend more time partying and less on business. Ethan, on the other hand, grew increasingly confident. He and Claire decided to move into one of the mansions under Avery's name, claiming it was the start of their perfect family. I didn't object, not because I agreed, but because I knew every move they made was a step closer to what I wanted. Finally, the opportunity arrived. Avery organized a huge party at one of the company's properties, claiming it was to attract new investors. The event was a disaster. The guests, important business people I had known for years, left, outraged by her lack of organization and careless attitude. When the news reached me, I made sure to call a meeting with the board of directors. The meeting was swift, almost painless. Most of the board had been on my side from the beginning, even after the transfer of shares. They knew Avery was incapable of leadership. During the meeting, I presented a comprehensive dossier on her actions over the past months, showing how she was putting the company at risk. I didn't need much effort to convince them. They voted unanimously to remove her from active management, leaving her with only a nominal title. Ethan and Claire, who were present, were visibly irritated but could do nothing. I still had allies in places they didn't expect. After the meeting, Ethan confronted me for the first time in months. He tried to shout at me, accusing me of manipulating everything. I simply looked him in the eye and asked, "Did you think it would be that easy? Did you think I would be destroyed so easily?" He didn't reply. He just left, taking Claire with him. Now, things were calmer on the surface, but I knew it wasn't over. Avery was still legally the owner of the shares and remained an important piece in the game I'd started to play. Ethan and Claire, on the other hand, were beginning to realize that the fortune they wanted wasn't as simple to control. They had resources, yes, but they were isolated. The world they built on lies was starting to crumble, slowly but steadily. After months of careful planning, everything was ready. Ethan, Claire, and Avery, each in their arrogance, thought I had given up. They had no idea that while they laughed and reveled in their perfect life, I was meticulously setting the stage for their downfall. I began the execution of my plan with something simple: an anonymous report to financial authorities about Ethan's suspicious transactions. He had been using accounts linked to Avery's name to embezzle money from the company, believing no one would ever uncover it. These details came from documents I obtained through a former accountant Ethan had fired. The accountant was more than willing to cooperate, especially when I promised to protect his anonymity. Meanwhile, a second report was filed against Claire. I discovered that, in her attempt to cover up her neglect of my biological daughter, she had falsified hospital documents to hide the abuse. Additionally, medical records showed that my daughter had mysteriously disappeared after being handed over to an orphanage, which was, in reality, a front for child trafficking. This revelation was one of the hardest truths I had to face, but it gave me the motivation I needed to push forward. Avery, on the other hand, was not my main target, but she became entangled in the chaos due to her own poor choices. The parties and scandals she dismissed as trivial began surfacing in the media. Authorities started investigating her, and despite her claims of being a victim, it became evident that her negligence and lack of leadership had contributed to the financial turmoil in the company. The final blow came during a public event. Ethan and Claire were attending a charity gala organized by Avery. They were glowing, acting as though they owned the world, when law enforcement officers arrived and arrested them right in front of everyone. The charges against Ethan included fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. For Claire, the accusations were even graver: document forgery, child abuse, and involvement in criminal activities related to the disappearance of my biological daughter. The silence in the room was broken only by the clicking of cameras. The expressions of shock on Ethan and Claire's faces were priceless. Avery, who up until that moment believed her perfect family was untouchable, broke down emotionally. She ran to me after the event, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please forgive me. I was blind. I thought they loved me, but they only used me. I just wanted to belong to a family." For a moment, I hesitated. I remembered all the years I spent raising her, believing she was my daughter. Avery had betrayed me, rejected me, but as I looked into her eyes, I saw the same little girl who once held my hand in fear on her first day of school. I couldn't hate her. "Avery," I murmured, "you made mistakes, but you are still my daughter. I raised you, I loved you, and I can't abandon that." She collapsed into my arms, sobbing as I held her tightly. Yet the moment was tinged with an unbearable sorrow. My biological daughter, the one I never truly got to know, had been a victim of unspeakable crimes. Authorities informed me that the orphanage where she had been sent had closed years ago, and her whereabouts remained unknown. That absence weighed heavily, casting a shadow over any sense of victory. With Ethan and Claire in prison and Avery attempting to rebuild her life, I regained control of the company. It wasn't easy, but over time, I restored the board's trust and rebuilt relationships with business partners. The company stabilized and its reputation was repaired. I decided to establish a foundation in honor of my missing daughter, dedicated to helping at-risk children. It was my way of keeping her memory alive, even without knowing where she was. In the end, I rose above it all. Ethan and Claire paid for their crimes, and Avery, despite everything, found redemption by my side. Still, the pain of not having my biological daughter with me will never fully fade. That scar remains, but it also reminds me of the strength I found to fight against those who tried to destroy my life. As I watched Avery working beside me, finally maturing, I felt that, in some way, we had rebuilt something. It's not perfect, and it never will be, but it's enough to move forward. Years later, I received a letter from a young woman claiming to be my biological daughter. She had been adopted by a kind family after escaping the horrors of the trafficking ring and had spent years searching for me. We met on a quiet afternoon, and as I held her in my arms, I felt a piece of my heart heal. The foundation I had started in her name had indirectly helped her find her way back to me, a bittersweet full circle. With Avery and my biological daughter by my side, I finally found the family I had longed for, built on love, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of justice.